I do think that there's constructive work being done out there. So for the viewers who are watching, I am optimistic about the capacity of us to come together with a plan. The question I think that we have to ask ourselves is, how did we get into this situation in the first place? 2 years ago, I warned that because of the subprime lending mess, because of the lax regulation, that we were potentially going to have a problem, and tried to stop some of the abuses and mortgages that were taking place at the time. Last year, I wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury to make sure that he understood the magnitude of this problem and to call on him to bring all the stakeholders together to try to deal with it. So the question I think that we've got to ask ourselves is, yes, we've got to solve this problem short term, and we are going to have to intervene. There's no doubt about that, but we're also going to have to look at how is it that we shredded so many regulations. We did not set up a 21st century regulatory framework to deal with these problems, and that in part has to do with an economic philosophy that says that regulation is always bad.
Are you going to vote for the plan, Senator McCain?
I hope so, and I...
As the United States Senator, you're going to vote for the plan?
Sure, but let me point out, I also warned about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and warned about corporate greed and excess and CEO pay and all that. A lot of us saw this train wreck coming. But there's also the issue of responsibility. You've mentioned President Dwight David Eisenhower. President Eisenhower, on the night before the Normandy invasion, went into his room and he wrote out 2 letters. One of them was a letter congratulating the great members of the military and allies that had conducted and succeeded in the greatest invasion in history, still to this day and forever. And he wrote out another letter, and that was a letter of resignation from the United States Army for the failure of the landings at Normandy. Somehow, we've lost that accountability. I've been heavily criticized because I called for the resignation of the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've got to start also holding people accountable, and we've got to reward people who succeed. But somehow in Washington today, and I'm afraid on Wall Street, greed is rewarded, excess is rewarded, and corruption, or certainly failure to carry out our responsibility, is rewarded. As President of the United States, people are going to be held accountable in my administration, and I promise you that'll happen.
Do you have something directly to say, Senator Obama, to Senator McCain about what he just said?
Well, I think Senator McCain's absolutely right that we need more responsibility, but we need it not just when there's a crisis. I mean, we've had years in which the reigning economic ideology has been what's good for Wall Street, but not what's good for Main Street. And there are folks out there who've been struggling before this crisis took place. And that's why it's so important, as we solve this short-term problem, that we look at some of the underlying issues that have led to wages and incomes for ordinary Americans to go down, the healthcare system that is broken, energy policies that are not working, because 10 days ago, John said that the fundamentals of the economy are sound. I do not think that they are.
Say it directly to him.
Well, John, 10 days ago, you said that the fundamentals of the economy are sound. And
you afraid I couldn't hear him?
I'm just determined to get you all to talk to each other. I'm going to try.
And I just fundamentally disagree. And unless we are holding ourselves accountable day in, day out, not just when there's a crisis for folks who have power and influence and can hire lobbyists, but for the nurse, the teacher, the police officer who, frankly, at the end of each month, they've got a little financial crisis going on. They're having to take out extra debt just to make their mortgage payments. We haven't been paying attention to them. And if you look at our tax policies, it's a classic example.
So, Senator McCain, do you agree with what Senator Obama just said? And if you don't, tell him what you disagree with.
No, but we've got to fix the system. We got fundamental problems in the system. And Main Street is paying a penalty for the excesses and greed in Washington, D.C., and in the Wall Street. So there's no doubt that we have a long way to go. And obviously, stricter interpretation and consolidation of the various regulatory agencies that weren't doing their job that has brought on this crisis. But I have a fundamental belief in the goodness and strength of the American worker, and the American worker is the most productive, the most innovative. America is still the greatest producer, exporter, and importer. But we've got to get through these times. But I have a fundamental belief in the United States of America, and I still believe, under the right leadership, our best days are ahead of us.
All right, let's go to the next lead question.